My name is Shirley. I'm 12 years old. And 37 days ago, my parents left me alone in our house with $20 and flew to Europe for a month-long vacation. No neighbor checking in. No relative nearby. No working credit card. Just me, $20, and a house that suddenly felt 10 times bigger than it ever had before. When they came back early because they had to, my mother stood in our kitchen doorway and whispered, "What did you do?" And I looked at her, surrounded by the people who finally cared enough to show up, and I didn't say anything at all, because the truth was already speaking louder than I ever could. If you believe children deserve protection, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Revenge Queens if you think neglect shouldn't be dressed up as trust. And comment below with where you're watching from, your city, your state, because I want to know how far this story travels. I want to know if anyone else sees what I see. This is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to make you angry. But I promise you, by the end, you'll understand why I documented everything. Why I had to. It started on a Tuesday morning. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table, and my mom had that bright, excited look she gets when she's about to tell me something she thinks is good news. She slid a $20 bill across the table and said, "We're going to Europe. Just the two of us. We need this, Shirley. We need to reconnect." My dad nodded, not quite looking at me. "You're 12 now. You're mature. You can handle a month on your own." A month. 30 days. Europe. I remember staring at that $20 bill like it was some kind of joke I wasn't getting. I said, "What about food?" And my mom laughed, actually laughed, and said, "There's plenty in the pantry. You're resourceful. Plus, we're leaving you the emergency card." The emergency card. A debit card in my name that I'd never used, never activated, never even held for more than 5 seconds. But she said it like it was this golden ticket, this safety net that made everything okay. I asked when they were leaving. She said, "Tomorrow." Tomorrow. 24 hours to process that I was about to be completely alone. No cousins nearby. No grandparents in town. No neighbor who'd been told to check on me. Just me and a house and $20 and a card I didn't even know worked. I watched them pack. I watched my dad fold shirts and my mom tuck her passport into a travel wallet that looked brand new. I watched them print boarding passes and check flight times and talk about museums and restaurants and how much they needed this. How much they deserved this. And I stood in the hallway, 12 years old, and wondered if I was supposed to feel proud that they trusted me. Because that's what they kept saying. "We trust you, Shirley. You're so mature. You're going to be fine." Trust. That word kept echoing in my head as they wheeled their suitcases to the car the next morning. My mom hugged me tight, too tight, like she was trying to squeeze a month's worth of affection into 10 seconds. My dad patted my shoulder and said, "Call if you need anything." But he didn't say who to call. He didn't leave a neighbor's number or a family friend's contact or even a hotel name. And then they were gone. The sound of the car pulling out of the driveway was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. I stood in the doorway, watching them disappear, and the house behind me felt like it was holding its breath. Like it was waiting to see what I would do. I went back inside. I locked the door. I stood in the kitchen and stared at that $20 bill still sitting on the table. And for the first time, I felt something that wasn't confusion or denial. I felt afraid. But I told myself I could do this. I told myself I was mature. I told myself they wouldn't have left if they didn't think I'd be okay. I was so good at lying to myself back then. The first 3 days I tried to make it work. I rationed everything. I ate half portions. I drank water instead of juice to make the bottles last. I counted crackers. I made a single can of soup stretch across 2 meals by adding extra water and pretending it was supposed to taste like that. I told myself it was like camping. Like an adventure. Like one of those survival shows where people make it through impossible situations and come out stronger. But this wasn't a show. And I wasn't stronger. I was just hungrier. On day 4, I tried the emergency card. I walked to the corner store, 20 minutes each way, and grabbed a loaf of bread, peanut butter, and a carton of milk. The cashier scanned my items, and I slid the card through the machine. Declined. I tried again. Declined. The cashier looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. Pity, maybe. Or suspicion. She said, "Do you have another way to pay?" I put everything back. I walked home. I cried in the bathroom so no one could hear, even though there was no one there to hear me. That night, I ate crackers and tap water for dinner. I didn't bother with a plate. I just sat on the kitchen floor and counted how many days were left. 26. 26 days of this. I started watching the clock instead of the calendar. Hours became the new measure of survival. How many hours until I could justify eating again? How many hours until it was acceptable to go to sleep just to escape the hunger? The house got quieter every day. Not because it was actually silent. Houses are never truly silent, but because I stopped making noise. I stopped turning on the TV because it reminded me of what other families were doing. I stopped opening windows because I could hear neighbors laughing outside, kids playing, parents calling them in for dinner. I started wondering if anyone even remembered I existed. If you're still watching this, you already care more than they did. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. If you've made it this far, you're giving me more attention than my own parents did for 37 days. So if you care, if you actually believe kids shouldn't be abandoned, subscribe to Revenge Queens. And if you don't want to subscribe, leave a comment telling me why. Tell me why this doesn't matter. Because I genuinely want to know. Day 8. I started feeling it in my body. Not just hunger. I'd been hungry before. This was different. My hands shook when I tried to write. My vision blurred when I stood up too fast. I felt cold all the time, even though it was summer. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. My face looked thinner. My eyes looked hollow. I looked like one of those kids in the commercials asking for donations. Except no one was asking for me. Day 11. I saw a family outside my window. A mom, a dad, 2 kids. They were loading up their car for some kind of trip. Beach gear, cooler, boogie boards. The mom was laughing. The dad was making jokes. The kids were arguing about who got to sit in the front seat. And I watched them, this normal family doing normal things, and I felt something break inside me. Not sadness. Not self-pity. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger. Because my parents were on vacation too. They were seeing museums and eating at cafes and taking pictures in front of landmarks. I knew, because my mom had posted on social media. She posted pictures of cobblestone streets and European architecture and captions like, "Much-needed getaway," and finally taking time for us. Not a single message to me. Not a single call. Not even a text asking if I was okay. But she had time to post photos for strangers. That's when I started writing things down. I grabbed an old notebook from my room, and I started documenting everything. Every meal I skipped. Every time I felt dizzy. Every time I tried the card, and it failed. Every social media post they made while I starved. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. It just felt important. Like if something happened to me, someone should know. Someone should have proof that this wasn't okay. I titled the first page, Evidence. Day 15. I started recording videos on my phone. Nothing dramatic. I didn't cry or scream or beg. I just turned the camera on and showed the truth. Empty fridge. Empty pantry. Failed card transaction. Dates and timestamps on everything. I recorded myself saying, Day 15. No contact. No food. Card still doesn't work. I'm 12 years old. I saved every video in a hidden folder. I didn't know who would ever see them. But I knew I needed them. Because the anger wasn't burning out. It was crystallizing. It was turning into something harder, colder, sharper. I realized something around day 17. I realized that if something happened to me, if I passed out or got sick or worse, no one would know for days. Maybe weeks. My parents wouldn't know because they weren't checking in. My school wouldn't know because it was summer break. The neighbors wouldn't know because they didn't even know I was alone. I could disappear, and it would take days for anyone to notice. That thought kept me awake at night. Not because I was scared, because I was furious. If you think this story matters, subscribe. If it doesn't, tell me why in the comments. I'll read every single one. Day 22. Someone knocked on the door. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one knew I was alone. No one was supposed to know. I looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Chun from 3 houses down. She was holding a casserole dish and looking concerned. I almost didn't answer. I almost let her think no one was home. Because opening that door meant risking everything. It meant someone might ask questions. Someone might find out. But I was so tired. I was so hungry. I was so done pretending I was fine. I opened the door. Mrs. Chen's face went from concerned to alarmed in about 2 seconds. She looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Shirley, where are your parents?" I could have lied. I should have lied. I should have said they were at work or running errands or asleep upstairs. But I was 22 days into surviving on crackers and water and anger. I was 22 days into being forgotten. So I told the truth. Europe. They've been gone for 3 weeks. They'll be back in 8 days. Mrs. Chen's expression changed. Not pity. Something harder. Something that looked like fury on my behalf. She said, "You're alone? For a month?" I nodded. She looked past me into the house. She saw the empty kitchen. She saw how thin I'd gotten. She saw everything I'd been trying to hide. She pulled out her phone. And just like that, the story I'd been living in silence became everyone's business. The next few hours were a blur. Mrs. Chun didn't leave. She made calls, I don't know who to, maybe CPS, maybe the police, maybe both. She asked me questions gently, carefully, like she was afraid I'd break if she pushed too hard. When did they leave? How much money did they give you? Have they called? Do you have food? I answered everything. I showed her the $20 I'd been hoarding. I showed her the card that didn't work. I showed her the empty fridge. And then I showed her the notebook, the videos, the evidence I'd been collecting without fully understanding why. She watched one video. Just one. A 30-second clip of me standing in the kitchen, saying, "Day 19. Still nothing." When it ended, she looked at me and said, "This is not your fault. You understand that, right? This is not your fault." I didn't cry. I couldn't. I'd used up all my tears somewhere around day 10. But I nodded. Because for the first time in 22 days, someone was telling me that I wasn't the problem. That I wasn't too needy or too weak or too immature. I was just a kid who'd been abandoned. If even a stranger cared enough to act, why wouldn't you care enough to subscribe? If you believe kids deserve protection, hit that button. If you believe neglect should have consequences, join this channel. Because what comes next is going to prove that truth is the loudest weapon a kid can have. They called my parents. I don't know the exact conversation, but I know it ended with them booking the first flight home. They cut their trip short. They came back 12 days early. In the days before they returned, I stayed with Mrs. Chin. She fed me real meals. She let me sleep in her guest room. She didn't ask me to explain or defend or justify anything. But I kept documenting. I kept organizing my evidence. I made a timeline. I printed social media posts. I made sure everything was dated, time-stamped, undeniable. Because I knew what was coming. I knew my parents would come back with excuses. They'd say it was a misunderstanding. They'd say I was supposed to be fine. They'd say they trusted me. And I wanted to make sure the truth was louder than their lies. The day before they came home, a social worker came to talk to me. She was kind but official. She explained what neglect meant. She explained what would happen next. She explained that adults were taking this seriously. And I realized something. I wasn't powerless. I'd never been powerless. I'd just been alone. But I wasn't alone anymore. They came home on a Wednesday afternoon. I was back at the house because the authorities wanted me there when they arrived. Mrs. Chun was there. The social worker was there. A police officer was there. My parents walked in expecting their daughter and an empty house. Instead, they got a courtroom. My mom saw everyone first. She stopped in the doorway, her suitcase still in her hand, and said, "What's going on?" The social worker introduced herself. She explained why she was there. She used words like neglect and endangerment and investigation. My dad's face went red. He started arguing immediately. "This is ridiculous. Shirley is mature. We left her with money and a card. We trusted her.
I didn't say anything.
I just pulled out my notebook. I showed them the logs. Every day I went hungry. Every time the card failed. Every post they made while I starved. Then I pulled out my phone. I played one video. Just one. Day 19. Me standing in the empty kitchen, hollow-eyed and shaking, saying, I don't know if anyone will ever see this. But if something happens to me, I need someone to know that I was here. That I tried. My mother's face went white. She whispered, What did you do? And I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, I survived. That's what I did. The social worker explained the determination. Neglect. Confirmed.
Documented.
Undeniable. They explained the next steps. Temporary supervision. Mandatory check-ins. Possible separation depending on compliance. My parents tried to argue. They tried to minimize. They said I was exaggerating, that I was dramatic, that I was too sensitive. But the evidence didn't care about their excuses. The videos didn't care about their intentions. The truth was louder than anything they could say. The officer asked if I wanted to stay with them under supervision or go to a temporary placement. I looked at my parents, these people who'd left me with $20 and a broken promise, and I said, I want to stay with Mrs. Chen. My mother started crying. My father started yelling. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time in my life, adults were listening to me instead of them. If you made it this far and still haven't subscribed, tell me why in the comments. I really want to know. What part of this story didn't matter to you? What part didn't earn your support? Because to me, this isn't just my story. This is every kid who's ever been left behind and told to be grateful for it. I stayed with Mrs. Chun for 2 months. I ate 3 meals a day. I slept in a bed that felt safe. I went to therapy and learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. My parents went through mandated parenting classes. They went through evaluations. They went through the consequences of treating their child like an inconvenience. I eventually went back home. But it was different. There were check-ins. There were rules. There were people watching to make sure I was safe. And my parents? They were different too. Quieter. Careful. Like they finally understood that trust isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. I still have the notebook. I still have the videos. Not because I want to relive it, but because I want to remember that I had the power all along. I just needed someone to listen. Revenge isn't screaming or violence or cruelty. Revenge is letting the truth speak when everyone expects you to stay silent. So, I want to ask you something. If this were you at 12 years old, would you stay silent? Would you protect the people who abandoned you? Or would you let the truth speak for you? Comment below. Tell me your answer. Tell me your story if you have one. Because the truth is, we're all just one choice away from being seen or staying invisible. And I chose to be seen. Subscribe to Revenge Queens if you believe truth is the best revenge. Like this video if you believe kids deserve protection. And comment where you're watching from, because I want this story to travel. I want it to reach every person who needs to hear it. My name is Shirley. I'm 12 years old. And I survived what my parents called trust. The truth called it something else.